I'm back from holidays and back from suffering from heat fatigue because I do not deal well with summer and it was very hot where I've been to. But I finally had the time to record this, so let me tell you about the high and lows of week 4 of learning digital art. This week was, just like week 3, all about focusing on studying anime characters that I like so that I could draw fan art of them. Last week I spent all 7 days on Kana from Oshinoko, and while that was a very helpful experience in many ways, I was really trying to add more variety this time around. I figured drawing a full body fan art when I'm still a beginner was bound to take time, so the plan for week 4 was to draw 2 anime characters. I would still dedicate a session to sketching full body poses for them, but only as an exercise for myself and nothing more. The actual illustrations were meant to be shoulders or waist up and no more than that, because I simply do not have the time for it. Now, did it work? Did I actually stick to my plan? No, I failed, partially. The part I didn't fail at was sticking to only drawing from shoulders up, but still, I only had the time to draw 1 anime character that entire week. Does that mean I maybe spent less time on it than I did the previous week? Yes, by 10 minutes. But let me explain from the beginning, starting on day 22. The character I decided on was Suo from Windbreaker, both because of recency bias and because I want to be able to draw not only anime girls, but anime boys as well, and because his character design makes him good for drawing shoulders up, since there is a lot of going on around his face, as you can probably tell. The first and the second day weren't any different from week 3. I started with breaking Suo's design down into references, which you can see on screen right here. And then I drew a rough sketch of his head without caring too much for the actual proportions, just so I could pick the colors I would be using. Can I just say, Suo's face is very mathematically pleasing, if you know what I mean? At least the anime style one. I was able to measure pretty much anything in the unit measure of 1/8 of his face length. His manga design is slightly different, yeah, and I did put the notes down here, just for the reference. This took me longer than Kana's reference sheet, but there is a very good reason for it. I only really needed this to pick the base colors and the shadows. I never meant to make it pretty in any way, but I was actually doing it on the train, and as I was starting on the eye, this granny sat down next to me. From the corner of my eye, I could see that she was watching what I was doing, but not in a judgmental way. She was really enjoying it, which kind of made me want to make it at least somewhat decent for her. She got off 2 stations later, so that wasn't too bad, but it was enough to have me both exhausted and frustrated with this eye. You probably can't see it on the time-lapse, but I actually kept changing and checking the colors all the time because I just couldn't find the right ones. I did manage to arrive at this by the time the granny left though, and she said it was pretty as she was getting off, so there's that. You can see the eye is of much better quality than the rest of him. Moving on to day 23. Once again, it's the poses day, where I tend to be far too ambitious for my own good. Because what beginner, in the right mind, chooses martial arts poses when they can't even draw a simple body standing straight? Me, apparently. I only drew 3 in the end, but they still took just as long as the 4 I did for Kana, and I think they're much worse, but that's beside the point. But that's because Suo is a long boy. I don't know if I just underestimated the proportions of anime characters, and when I say that, I mean anime characters of more or less generic anime styles. Art styles like the one in Code Geass don't count, or if Windbreaker really does have higher proportions. But as I was sketching, I kept checking if I'm 100% sure he's over 7 heads tall. I know I wrote the numbers right next to him, so there is no way I made a mistake, but I just kept recounting it at least 4 times because I couldn't believe it. And then after not being happy with any of those, I called it a day and watched anime instead. But you may ask, that's just day 2. You have 5 days left and you're not doing a full body pose. So what in the world took you so much time? And well, you'll see. Going into day 24, I was still of full belief that I would finish Suo up in 2 days and then I would draw another character, which was meant to be Makima from Chainsaw Man. Don't judge me. But then 2 things happened. One, the details. Kana's illustration was more difficult in a sense that it was a full body one, but that also meant I didn't need to pay too much attention to the things no one would notice anyway. Her hair was like a solid mass without much, if any, variation to it. Her outfit was complicated, but since I didn't know how to draw folds and that stuff like that, I didn't even attempt it. And I could do all of that because the drawing itself was zoomed out, so the focus of that illustration was all of her, if that makes sense. But with Suo, the main focus of this drawing was going to be his face, which means it has to look good. I didn't want it to be too boring, so I did the thing every anime artist does. I added some magical wind. Well, not very magical because he's outside, but you know. I spent a long time just sketching his hair. I kept thinking, is it too much? Too little? Should I add more loose strands? Should I combine some of them? I will say that I was quite happy with it in the end, but my god, do I need to learn to draw the face before I draw the hair? Because after I did that, I had to realign the partition again because it was way too off-center. The one thing I did half-ass was actually his uniform. I still can't be bothered to draw clothes, sorry. But the thing I did not half-ass this time, because I do learn from my mistakes sometimes, is drawing the hands. The sketching part wasn't too bad, but later on it will become my mortal enemy. And the earrings, that's the part I actually liked. But as you may still remember, because I literally only said it like a minute ago, I said there were 2 reasons as to why this took so long. And now we're getting to the second one. If any of you saw and remember my video on week 3, I was very vocal about my hatred for the background I gave Kana. Truth be told, after that week, I went and just stared at it for a long time, trying to understand why I don't like it, other than for the obvious reason that I just can't do backgrounds, of course. Because by that time, I drew a lot of things I didn't like pretty much anything that wasn't a direct copy of the reference. But I was never as distraught with them as I was with that background for Kana. And then it hit me. It's because the style didn't match Kana's figure. Because Kana had line art to define her, even if I colored it so that it wouldn't be too visible. But the background was just a blurred sheet of fake shapes and nothing more. Which brings me to my reason number 2. I ended up spending a lot of time on the background this time around. Not only on this day, but later on as well. It wasn't anything complicated, as you can see, but for someone who's only drawing a background for the second time in their life, that little piece of wood was exhausting. Maybe not so much in the sketching phase as it will be later on. Sketching alone took me 1 hour and 50 minutes, which by comparison is 40 minutes more than I spent on Kana. But I did get that time back the very next day. I think it's because I made the sketch quite accurate and really only had to trace over it. I did end up making some lines different and adding more details here and there and on the eye patch, but those didn't really take that long because I already had a very good base. What did take long was the thing right here. I just don't know. I thought I liked the sketch, but then the next day I didn't, so I changed it. I thought I was satisfied with it, but every time I would glance back, I was like, why can't you just be good? So yeah, I did waste quite a long time on it. But once I was done with Suo, I did a 5-head move and decided that instead of doing line art for the tree, which will most likely end up blurred anyway, I could just color the sketch black and leave it. So I did that and saved time. Work smart, not hard. This is the point where I was like, this is taking me longer than expected. But if I just color it in one day, since there isn't much to color to begin with, or so I thought, I could still at least attempt to draw Makima even if she won't have any background going for her. Famous last words, yeah. Anyway, coloring took me almost 3 hours across 2 days. And I'm talking about Suo's colors alone. I admit, most of it is because of the hair. I knew I couldn't just hide the lack of any kind of texture with shadows like I did for Kana, so I focused on it a little too much. For a moment, I also wanted to maybe try doing that dramatic bright day / sun seeping through the leaves type of lighting. You know the kind, where half of the character's face and hair are of a completely different color or straight up just white because they're that bright. I gave up on it rather quickly. Lighting is something you will see me study eventually, but that was just not the day for it. Another thing I struggled with was, to no one's surprise, the hand. Even though I more or less came to terms with the fact that this is how it will end up looking, the shadows were... I don't think it needs to be said, but I don't usually look at hands from this angle, and especially not in this type of situation, so I had no idea what I was doing. One thing I now think was funny is that I left the eye for last. I usually do them first because coloring eyes is something I genuinely enjoy, but I think I was just scarred from how long it took me to get the colors right on that train with the granny watching me. I shouldn't have been worried though, because having the colors already there along with the notes made the process really fast. It was done before I knew it. So, end of day 6, and I still wasn't finished. I still had the background and some finishing touches to do, and I just need to rant. For something as generic and common in anime art as a sakura tree, this really is annoying to draw. Like, it was way too much trouble for the outcome that I got. I do like how the petals in the front turned out, and I don't hate the tree itself. It's just, I wish there was a quicker way to do this. Which there probably is, if only I had searched for some brushes to make my life easier, but let's not mention that. The tree aside, adding in the finishing touches can be really satisfying. I think I said it before as well, but let me repeat myself. I especially liked adding these thin strands of the hair and the earrings and the glows here and there. And then I fixed his color as well, because after day 6 it was just too pink. It doesn't match his canon color completely, but I blame it on the lighting. It's close enough to me, and I drew this for me. After adding some more touches that aren't on any of the time lapses because my tablet was exploding at that point, the final result is this. You know, with Kana, while I was genuinely happy with her, I also knew it wasn't actually the best or even that good. It had good elements to it, sure. I still think her shoes turned out pretty nicely, and so did the frills, but her face looked flat, her expression was whatever, and then there was that background and the lighting that was just way too dark. But this. It's not that there aren't things to pick on, because obviously there are, even I can see them, but this to me is what I've always wanted to be able to do. This is something I'm not hesitant to post online. I know this may sound weird because I already posted like 3 videos where I draw much worse stuff, and I even posted that kind of fan art on Twitter, which I really should start using more often. I just keep forgetting it exists. But none of them were something I was actually glad about having online. I was never ashamed of them. If I was the kind of person to be ashamed of being a beginner at something, I wouldn't have many of the skills that I do have today. And I was also never scared of posting it. I know the internet is a cruel place, and that while I may not have gotten it yet, the chances of getting future hate on what I post are really high. I just don't really care. There isn't anything a stranger on the internet can say to me that I haven't already said to myself. But those videos and then me posting Kana on Twitter, that wasn't something for me to be happy about. It was necessary so that I could have a reason to continue and not give up halfway through. And it is something I was and am proud of, because it's a proof of how far I've come from point 0 to now. This is actually why my videos have not only the total days, but also the total hours counter in the corner of all of my time lapses. So that if in the distant future that isn't right now, I get to a point where I can personally stop calling myself a beginner, a point where I will think that I'm a good artist in my own eyes, regardless of whatever good or bad anyone else may say about me. I want the proof that I worked for it to exist, and that's these videos. But with this piece, I actually sent it to my friend, who is a much bigger fan of Windbreaker than I am, and I kid you not, they have it as their screen background to this day. When I saw it, I was like, okay, what if I cry, huh? What if? All of that to say, I'm really happy with it. Really, really happy. And it was, for the most part, fun to work on, which I think is the most important part in the learning process. But anyway, this got way too deep for a fan art video for some reason, so let me just end it here. There you have the usual end of week comparison and the time frames. Week 1, week 4, some few minutes, and then a few hours. Yeah, that's it. In week 5, I'll be studying some actual basics. Kind of, not really, but kind of. And trying to draw my OC instead of fan art, so look forward to my misery and stubbornness then. Bye!